Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn, and I run the services at medcomsnetworking.com. This is an array of services and resources and so on are provided for people who work in and around the global medcoms community, by which I mean people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, but also importantly for people who want to work in medcoms. And you'll find, for instance, a lot of resource now at a site called FirstMedCommsJob.com, where you'll find articles, webinars, videos, careers guides, and more, which hopefully help people understand the business that we're talking about, and it provides support to those of you who want to join us. And part of this is running these sorts of webinars and talking to people from the agencies, discussing the business we're in. So today, this is a sort of first MedComs job webinar, as it were. We're talking to the guys from Bioscript, who are going to talk about their company, and particularly with Bioscript, we can talk about regulatory and medcoms type work because you do both. So we're going to try and highlight those differences and explain the different roles amongst the medical writers and so on. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Judy then to introduce herself and the team and talk us through a presentation, which will be followed by an open Q&A. So get ready, audience, with your questions. Thank you very much, Judy.
Thanks very much, Peter. Can you guys give me a nod if you can see my screen? That will be a yes then. Good news. All right, well, thanks very much, and it's lovely to be talking to everybody. Without further ado, we're going to start off with a quick introduction to the Bioscript team here today, and a little bit of background of how we've got to where we are in our careers. So I'm Judy Brownsword, and I kind of fell into medical communications almost by accident. My plan had been to be a research scientist for the pharmaceutical industry, and so I did a degree and a PhD in biochemistry. But about halfway through my PhD, I suddenly realized that I just could not see myself spending the next 40 years dealing with failed experiments in the laboratory. So I then was at a loss to know what to do with this, scientific experience that I'd spent so long building up. But fortunately, the careers department at Manchester University were very good. So when I went and explained this problem to them, they suggested medical writing, which seemed like a really good fit. So I took them up on that. I got a job as an associate medical writer at one of the local agencies in Macclesfield. And then over the next sort of 15 years, I worked my way through a fairly standard career path for a medical writer, through senior medical writer to scientific director. But then took a bit of an extra move into senior management, where I was the director of scientific services. And this was much more of an operational position, looking at training and development of medical writers, process and quality improvements, and recruitment and retention. But now I've changed direction into maybe a more commercial role. So I'm now the customer strategy director at Bioscript. And my real focus here is to identify new clients that we might want to work with, win business with them, and also increase the profile of Bioscript within the industry, which is one of the reasons that I'm part of this team today. Ciaran.
Hi there, my name is Ciaran Wright, and I'm a scientific director within the medcoms division of the company. So a scientific director is essentially the position above senior medical writer. Rather unusual background of being both a healthcare professional and scientist. I started off as a registered nurse before studying for a master's degree at the Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification at Dundee, and then went on to do a PhD in skin physiology and biomechanics. Like Judy and like many other medical writers, I considered a career in medcoms because I like stability and couldn't think of anything worse than applying for research grants every 18 months. I started my first medcoms job straight out of my PhD in 2015. And I stayed at that company for a year before starting at Bioscript as an associate medical writer in 2016. From that point, I gained wide exposure to a range of different project types, deliverables, clients, and therapy areas, and increased my level of responsibility through medical writer, senior medical writer, and scientific director roles. I'm now responsible for managing a team of writers over several client accounts. My main goal is basically to ensure excellent quality deliverables and client satisfaction. I'd say my favourite part of the job is working at congresses, particularly on satellite symposia and competitor intelligence, and anywhere where I get to travel and work on site. Over to you, Rye.
Okay, so my name's Rye, and I am, as it says, a regulatory writer, and I I was very deliberate in getting into regulatory writing. So my background is I studied chemistry, realized early on that the lab is not where I wanted to be. And I actually moved from there into the pharmaceutical industry, worked in pharma manufacturing, specifically in quality assurance. So that's things like writing SOPs and making sure people follow them, and making sure that we're compliant with the regulatory guidelines for manufacture. But I realized after a little while I was much more interested in the writing side of that than the telling people off for not following the SOPs side. So I made a move into reg writing, and I was actually, I came in as an associate regulatory writer, and I was Bioscript's very first associate regulatory writer. So I've very much learnt my trade within the company and progressed to regulatory writer now. Yeah, on to Will.
Thanks, Rye. Yes, so hi everyone, I'm Will. I'm an account executive at Bioscript. So a little bit different to Ciaran and Rye. I'm more focused on the sort of client relationship management side of it, the day-to-day operational project management, and making sure that the scientific folk know everything and have everything that they need to do their job on a daily basis. In terms of my background, so I actually did business management at university, graduated not really knowing what I wanted to do, and ended up working in recruitment for about 5 or 6 years. Moved into pharmaceutical sales recruitment and sort of discovered medcoms through there, and really understood that it would be much more of a sort of a project oriented role, so I could sort of get my teeth into it and work on something a little bit more long term. And so made the move about 18 months ago now, again joining as an associate account exec, you know, right at the bottom of the ladder, wanting to grow and move forward, and I'm sort of pushing my career forward as quickly as I can. So really excited to be here. Thank you, Peter, for the invitation, and back to you, Judy.
Very much. So just a quick overview of Bioscript. So we're an independent agency. We are headquartered in Macclesfield, but we do also have offices in Germany and in the United States. Over the past 16 years, we've grown well year on year. We have close to 100 permanent employees now, and we are actively recruiting, so we're hoping to hit that milestone in the next few weeks. Everything we do is supported by our company values, which were developed with the whole company team. And these are quality in everything that we deliver, continuous improvement in everything that we do, ownership, which means that each individual takes it on themselves to maintain the highest standards of conduct and delivery, respect, which is of course listening and collaborating and respecting each other's opinions and beliefs. And then finally, the team, in that we work together to support one another to reach our full potential, both individually and also as a business. Now, our main focus is medical communications and regulatory writing, but we also have a new service supporting patient recruitment and retention in clinical trials. We have a group of experts in health economics and outcomes research. We do a lot of digital work, and we also offer strategic consultancy service to our clients. And this unique blend of expertise really gives us the abilities to support our clients throughout the product lifecycle.
Okay, so I'll open up by talking about regulatory writing a little bit. So regulatory writing is working on the documents that health authorities will use to determine whether or not a drug can be approved, whether or not clinical trials can start, and whether they can continue. So it's really helping pharmaceutical companies in planning, the reporting, and ongoing update of documents during clinical trial and through drug development. So with regulatory documents, they're quite formal, structured, quite templated documents, very clear rules and guidance and regulations. There's not too much room for creativity and fluff on the reg side. The focus instead is on clear, efficient, unambiguous reporting of data and methods. And what I really like about reg is that you're bringing together a team of experts and helping them to communicate their message clearly. It's making a really consistent and clear document. And in reg writing, you get to see the entire story of a drug product, like right from the early lab testing through its first in-man trials, right through to big phase 2, phase 3 trials and drug approval. And even once a drug has been approved, there's still things like changes to the approval status or change in indication. There's a lot. I find it very interesting.
So medical education is what many people would consider as bread and butter medcoms, and it essentially takes information from the types of structured documents that Rye was referring to, which regulatory writers are often involved in, such as clinical study reports. And we take that data and we create publications and various different deliverables to get that data into the public domain. So this might be publications in journals, abstracts and posters at congresses, PowerPoint slides again at congresses. And as well as that, we're also involved in continuing medical education, which is a forum for allowing doctors to keep their registration. So this type of writing requires various levels of creativity because trial data and other information must be weaved together in different formats for the audiences. And this may range from hardcore scientists and researchers to doctors, nurses, and even patients. So there's quite a variation there in the types of audiences we might work to deliver towards. So HEOR, or health economics and outcomes research, basically takes a more in-depth look at both the clinical and the financial outcomes of medicines and technologies. It's tasked with generating evidence of the value of a new drug or other intervention for reimbursement and healthcare payers. It establishes and measures the link between treatments and actual outcomes, and it provides evidence-based guidance on how to improve care. It takes quite a broad view of the health outcome of an intervention, and it includes not only clinical trial data, but also clinical outcomes data and financial data as well. And it also measures quality of life and patient satisfaction.
Brill. And then just from a digital perspective and the type of offerings that we do from that perspective. So we're seeing a big growth in 2020 and 2021, as I'm sure you can all imagine, with the need for digital. A lot of the congresses that have been alluded to have gone virtual. So, you know, we need to support them with virtual symposiums and virtual presentations. You know, I myself am going to be in a virtual advisory board later on today, where there's going to be a whole bunch of, you know, national world leading key opinion leaders grouping together. And then we've run and created some clinical trial recruitment websites as well. So, you know, I think digital is an area of medical communications that's really been embraced in 2020, and we're only going to see more of that moving forward.
And then finally, we offer strategic consultancies to our clients. So this is really helping them understand what the unmet needs are in their target market, what data they need to generate to demonstrate that their product will meet those unmet needs, who they need to work with, what external experts can help them bring that product to market right through the beginning of the clinical development stages, as Rye described it. Who are their audiences, and how do we communicate that important data to each of those individual audiences? So that's a lot of stuff that we do, and it can be very overwhelming to someone who's new to the business. So if you were to join Bioscript as an associate, how would we really help you get up to speed in all the things that we do?
So when an associate medical writer joins the company, we ensure that they're given plenty of training to be able to do their jobs well. So we start off with an effective science communication 5-day course, which gives a proper introduction to most of the key aspects of the job, including abstracts, posters, oral presentations, manuscript development, and even things like writing style. It's a highly practical course, which we have run for several years, and it's always been very well received. In addition, we run shorter training sessions that are both internally and externally driven. I'm not going to discuss all of these, but it's just a highlight that there are a wide range of areas that we provide training in, from compliance to design skills. And this is also ensured that our writers are well supported on the job. So ongoing training. We work in quite a highly regulated environment and it changes quite a lot. So therefore, it's critical that all of our staff members are kept up to speed with these changing regulations. We do this through internal and external training courses covering best publication practices. And we also attend annual medical writing congresses and ensure that we're compliant with our internal policies and procedures, such as the way documents are stored.
Brill. And then just, I suppose, in terms of the actual the people within Bioscript, it really is the core to our business. It's what makes the company run. You know, we're still a family operated, privately owned company. And we very much try to retain that sort of feel where everyone knows they can talk to anyone within the business. You know, when we are in the office, you like to think it's an open door policy. Currently, it's more of an open Zoom/Teams virtual door policy. But, you know, the idea is there that you can speak to anyone at any point. You know, I can reach out to the directors or the scientific senior people, whoever it may be, to really grow that sort of collaborative working approach. And we really want to continue that because ultimately it's what makes Bioscript Bioscript.
Another thing that like makes Bioscript Bioscript, as Will said, is not just that, but there's a load of things that the company does to promote employee well-being, and not just employee, but community well-being. So we have community volunteer days where one day out of the working year, you can do volunteering in your local community. Bioscript runs Pilates mindfulness sessions, currently virtually, obviously, but in the office previously. And we also have what we call fika. It's a Swedish concept, but it's essentially getting together for snacks and coffee or tea or a hot drink and a bit of a natter. And that's something that's continued as we've all kind of moved to home-based working for the present. We used to have it in the office with pastries, it was very good. And now we have it, now we have snacks delivered from Bioscript, which is also very good. And if you wanted to see more of the things that we do, it's worth checking out our Twitter, which is currently, I think, full of ISMAP posts, because ISMAP is an important event in the MedComms calendar, but we also post about things like this. And these are just some of the terms that employees have used to describe Bioscript. It really is genuinely a very friendly company, which is great, especially when you're kind of first learning the ropes in the industry and in the role. Being able to just ask anyone questions as you need to makes a big difference.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks to my co-panelists, and we look forward to taking your questions.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. That was all very comprehensive. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for sharing slides. Okay, cool. Right, so thank you. Those of you who are listening, and we've got quite a reasonable sized audience today, which is great to see. Just a quick reminder to you that you have a chat button and a Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. Use either of them. Just type in your comments, your questions, your observations. We'll see them and weave them into the conversation. So please feel free to ask your questions, okay? And I want to start, let's just start by facing up to the obvious point, guys. This is, we're talking in February 2021. You know, we're in lockdown, you've alluded to it and so on. Let's not get bogged down in this because we're running quite a lot of activity at the moment that's talking about, you know, people working. But just give us a sense from Bioscript, maybe Judy, just an overview. You know, it's been a disrupted year. Just give us a sense of how you've coped, what you've done to support the people and so on, and frankly how much of a challenge it's been, how has it upset or not the work. So just give us a sense of it.
Yeah, so I guess a quick overview. I mean, we moved very quickly before official lockdown into deciding we would probably end up closing our offices. So we shipped out IT equipment to everybody who needed it, which was, I guess, the key logistical thing that we had to deal with. We obviously started working in this kind of virtual face-to-face environment. It took people a little bit of a while to get used to interacting with people in this way, often people were a bit disinclined to switch their video cameras off, but actually, you know, I think as everybody has now, we've got a lot more used to it, and it's much more relaxing to do it this way. I think for us, I mean, and for many people, because we were already beginning to work towards a model where we had more permanent home workers than we had previously, they have found that it has become much more inclusive for them, because everyone's in the same position and we're not having conversations without them in the office. So from that kind of like team cohesion approach, it's actually in many cases really improved things, but it does mean that we have to work a lot harder to make sure that if there are people who aren't in meetings constantly, like some of us are, that we're making sure that they are getting included and they are getting the opportunities for that more social interaction. So we do the FICA that Rye already alluded to. We have some sort of more social events. We have a weekly Zoom quiz. So it's not been easy, but actually we adapted to it much better than I think we expected to.
I think just to add to that as well, Judy, I think as part of the sort of remote onboarding process, you know, everyone gets that chance to be introduced to everyone virtually. So there'll be sort of informal catch-ups with different people within different parts of the business, just as a way of understanding what everyone does, because obviously there's so much to learn early on. So I think making sure that everyone can kind of be introduced to people just so you get to know them, but also understand their role a bit more as well is really helpful and something that's been really, really fruitful.
And okay. Sorry, I just wanted to add the other thing is about the well-being aspect of that as well. I mean, we have a well-being team now who are, I mean, again, I've alluded to it briefly, but you know, the Pilates and other kind of virtual things to sort of help with that, and also virtual workspace assessments done by an expert rather than us just going, oh yes, I'm sitting right and all the rest of it. You know, that we put a lot of effort into making sure that people are healthy, both mentally and physically, working from home.
Excellent. Well, hurrah for that. As far as I'm concerned, that's important. We're already, this is looking like it's going to be a very lively audience. We're getting a lot of questions and comments coming in already. So bear with us, guys, and we're going to sort of pick up on as many themes and specific questions as we can. But don't stop. Bring, you know, keep them coming. But there's a lot coming already. Okay, right. So we are where we're at. A question that came in, I think it was from Emily earlier on. Let's just, which I was going to ask, and you may or may not have a clear answer for. But do you see an end to this remote working? Do you think you'll go back to an office? I know there's a mix of flexible working and office space, but do you think you'll go back to that, or do you think we've actually just changed fundamentally and actually you've gone further down the line of more people working flexibly? And where does that leave the office? I suppose just a little bit of a quick answer to that sort of a question.
So.
Judy, I was going to say, Judy.
Yes. So we're all keen to have more face-to-face interaction, of course. But as I've said, we've also moved more and more to employing people who couldn't be full-time in the office anyway for, you know, location reasons. And so that kind of hybrid model that we were already kind of starting to move towards will continue. I think for us, what's important about the office space is two things. One, it allows us to do some form of team building and, you know, that face-to-face interaction, which is important, but also to have it there for people who really do struggle to work from home. You know, especially, you know, you have people in one-bedroom flats who, especially through lockdown, it was really hard because he couldn't even leave them. You know, Will, thanks, Will. Will, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I think so. When temporarily the offices were opened back up, we did the office management team did a really great job of sort of making it COVID safe and installing screens and sanitizations and all the different ways. So when they opened it back up, you know, as Judy mentioned, you know, I live in a small one-bed flat where there were two of us working, one in the bedroom, one in the living room, and it's easy to get stuck to a screen all day. So when the offices did open back up, you know, I was going in 2-3 times a week, purely because I wanted to go in and see people and have that flexibility. Some people prefer, you know, that working from home ability. Others like to have the split. Others prefer to be in the office. So, you know, I think my experience as and when we have been able to has been really, really positive from that side.
Excellent. Okay, right. We could probably get a bit bogged down in that if we're not careful. And I'm just going to be blunt and say we're talking about this a lot on other videos and things like this. So I'm keen to move on a little bit. And the theme for today's discussion, I'm going to constantly be trying to compare and contrast the regulatory and medcom side, okay? And it's overly simplistic. There's lots of words you've already used within the presentation that, is that medcoms or whatever, and some of the areas like HOR or things like this. I'm just going to try and keep this a bit simple and try and compare and contrast medcoms and regulatory as much as I can, okay? So just again, straight question. I don't know the answer to some of these questions, by the way, so I'm waiting to see what you say. Just give me a sense. You've got regulatory and medcoms. Broadly speaking, is that similar size groups? How many people work on the two sides? Rye, how many of you are on the regulatory side?
The reg group is quite a bit smaller, I believe, than the comms group. Yeah, it's quite a bit small, although it's rapidly expanding, which is great. We're certainly not short of work, so it's great to see.
Okay, but it's more than you at the moment. There's a group of them, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Gosh, I don't even know how many.
All right, don't worry. I was just trying to get a sense within that 100 people as to how you split it, but it's not an important question. Okay, so what I want to try and get, and I think you've already done quite a good job of outlining the different sort of products, as it were, if I can put it like that. But what I always try and get at is, why does someone go regulatory or medcoms? Because people listening to this are sort of hearing medical writing and maybe not even fully understanding that there are different sorts of medical writing, and we're going to oversimplify it today. But try and give me a sense, and I'll start with Ryan. Maybe Ryan, Ciaran can answer this from the two different points of view. Why do you think you're attracted to regulatory writing, Rye, as opposed to medcoms, or do you not see it as cut and dry as that? Just try and talk a little bit around that.
No, I'm happy to do so. So I think for me personally, it relates to my background and what I was doing prior to medical writing. So because I was previously working in the pharmaceutical industry and I was working in pharmaceutical manufacturing, I was used to dealing with the sort of documents that I'm now writing or working on. So things like the clinical trial reports and the product dossier, these quite technical, quite involved, data-heavy documents. I was used to working with them, and I find them very interesting. So when I was first looking at medical writing, from the very beginning, I was like, these are the sorts of documents I want to work on. Whereas if someone prefers, and this is something that Ciaran can perhaps talk more about, but my impression is, if you're more interested in working on the posters, the abstracts, the conferences, then you'd gravitate more towards medcoms.
I observe that people tend to go one way or the other, and there tends to be relatively little crossover. Yeah. Do you, within Bioscript, see that, or do you see people moving? I'll come on to medcoms in a minute, Ciaran, but from a regulatory point of view, do you see that as the pathway you're going down, and people tend to follow that pathway? I know there's always exceptions. Or within a company like Bioscript, do you actually see encouragement to cross over? Again, we're being a bit simplistic.
We've had people cross over from one side to the reg side. I'm not sure if I've seen it the other way, but like I said, it's a smaller group on the regulatory side. So a lot of my colleagues have worked previously in medcoms and then perhaps gained some experience in reg documents where there is a little bit more of a blurred line between them. Sometimes comms writers will do a little bit on regulatory documents. So yeah, we've had both people who've worked in comms before and also people who were working in medcoms at Bioscript who have then either done a temporary secondment over to the reg side or have moved permanently over to the reg side.
Okay, so and that might be interesting to some people. I mean, they can see both sides in a company like Bioscript, and there's some movement. And having said that, just a couple of very straightforward questions. You come in as an associate medical writer within Bioscript on the regulatory, an associate regulatory writer, is that how you phrase it? In Bioscript, yeah. Just the simple, obvious questions. Do you need a PhD or not? We've got a bunch of these questions coming in, so I'm just trying to round up. Do you need a PhD? Do you not need a PhD? Do you need postgraduate? Do you not need postgraduate? Just give it. Is it a problem to you? Someone said, "Am I limited? Is there a ceiling or something if I don't have a PhD?" Just sticking for a moment with the regulatory side. Is there anything that you can answer to that is any way limiting or context in there?
I can confirm that you do not need a PhD or a postgrad because I myself have a bachelor's. I think that it helps to either have the master's or the PhD, or to have relevant industry experience. But then if your studies have taken you in a direction where you've been kind of learning about clinical trials, that knowledge and that interest go a long way.
Okay, great. Let's stick at this sort of level of the discussion, as it were, in terms of coming in, and let's switch. Can I switch to Ciaran and the medcoms side? You're representing medcoms now, okay? So same sort of questions, okay? Why does someone come into medcoms as opposed to regulatory?
I would say probably the variety of different types of deliverables to different audiences. MedComms is very much, it's highly publications driven in terms of peer-reviewed manuscripts, but there's also a lot of Congress activity as well. So that could be abstracts and then resulting posters and oral presentations. Attended on site to deliver satellite symposia, going on site to a Congress specifically to cover the Congress in terms of competitor intelligence. There's a lot of different types of things that you can do, and it's, I guess it's, I would say maybe more creative than regulatory, and I guess maybe you have a bit more ownership of what you do as well. You're not following strict guidelines. You can kind of, you can wing it a little bit, and it's it's quite
Okay. And similar questions again, just quick fire questions. Do you need the PhD? Do you not need the PhD? Do you need postgraduate? Just answer to those sorts of questions that there's quite a few of coming in.
Yeah, so it's essentially exactly the same as Rye said. We will accept people with a bachelor's degree, and relevant experience helps. Master's students, PhD students who have recently graduated, we accept them. There's not really, it all comes down to the person,
right?
Really.
Okay, so
in terms of the recruitment, it comes down to the writing test. My experience over more years than I want to count of reviewing writing tests suggests that people with a PhD, on the whole, let's say more people with PhDs do well on a writing test than the applications that we have from people who don't have PhDs. But that's not to say that you don't get some extremely good candidates who don't, and we have employed those candidates.
To some extent, is it just as obvious as the PhD type candidate has got some more experience of writing?
That's
the important point is it's not necessarily medcoms writing, and that's an important point that I think people need to understand, because you're going to train them as a medcoms writer or indeed as a regulatory writer, but you're still looking for basic writing ability, and practice has helped, sort of thing.
Writing and synthesis of complex
the data,
scientific data are the two skills that we're looking for.
Okay, again, comparing and contrasting, do you bring people in any time of the year? Do you have any formalized sorts of programs or anything? Is it any different on either side? Judy?
So the associate positions,
associate level,
we are right now just launching the recruitment. So that's a kind of yearly cycle, if you like, but beyond associates, then it's as and when.
Okay. That was medcoms, and the same on the regulatory side, or
same on
okay. And we've got a couple of questions come in, obvious ones, I guess. Again, compare, contrast. Anyone jump in? Writing test on the regulatory side, is it the same or different as a regulatory test on a medcom side?
Not seen the other one.
Everyone's looking a bit surprised with that question. Can you give us a sense of what the difference is, Judy? Sorry.
So the reg writing one, and to be fair, I haven't seen that one. As I understand it, is more focused on regulatory writing, whereas the medcoms one includes a scientific abstract, but then more of a kind of promotional piece as well.
Okay, all right. So there are different tests. Let's not go further with that. Right, we're not quite sure what they are, but there are definitely some differences there. Can you spot? Okay, so this is the killer question, right? Okay, Ciaran, let's go for you. Can you spot a medcoms writer and a reg writer at 100 paces, or not?
That's a very, very tricky question.
And you may not have an answer, but what is
probably? Yeah, I guess somebody that likes working on big complex documents versus somebody that likes, fast changing ways of working and different types of deliverables. Those would be the kind of distinctions. I don't know if that
Okay. And Rye, would you nod your head at that one? I think you did nod your head actually. Is that, I mean, we're being very simple here, but there is that sense, there is a difference, yeah? Maybe not.
I think so. I would say it depends on what they're interested in, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. Let's not thrash this one too far. Within, again, compare, contrast a little bit, although I think I know the answers. MedComms associate medical writer is on the MedCom side, associate regulatory writer. Career pathway, just very briefly, associate medical writer, regulatory writer, onto what? A medical writer, onto senior medical writer, onto, is that, everyone's going to nod with me? Is there any differences, anything that we need to explain about that, or is it as straightforward as that?
On the medcom side, once you get past senior medical writer level, you kind of have a choice between progressing towards principal medical writer or progress towards scientific director. And they're quite, the roles are generally quite similar, but a scientific director will generally be more of a management position and less a deliverable position, whereas a principal writer will be very focused on excellent deliverables with less management.
Excellent. Okay. Well, that was quite clear. And I'm going to bring you in, Will. Sorry, we're not ignoring you. Just a few words, just if you can. You're on the medcom side, though, aren't you? Your support, I guess you're supporting the medical writers. Just from your point of view, just explain a little bit how you support them and interact with them a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a broad question, but I suppose it's all about making sure it's about making sure that the clients have everything that they request, and we're taking the briefs as accurately as we can. And it's then making sure that that team of medical writers have all the information that they need to be able to do their job, on time, within the correct budget, and to the required standards. So, whether that's creating timelines that they're going to need to send the drafts back to and from for review, if it's coordinating to see who the resource might be on a particular manuscript or abstract, it might be communicating with the client if something's gone wrong or indeed gone really well. Every day is very, very different. That is the main thing, I think, for anyone who's interested in the client services side. Obviously it's a little less on the scientific, but the scientific background does help. But really, I think anyone who loves a spreadsheet, anyone who's commercial and likes supporting and helping others and enabling them to do their job, that would be of interest.
Okay, and again, without going too far down the line of what you do as an account exec, so I'm looking at what you do to support the writers, which is what the focus of today is. Are the writers liaising with the clients at all? Do you just liaise with the client? Is there a mixture?
Mixture depending on the level. So I think when you're working with somebody who's a bit more junior, obviously they'd be working with a senior member of the team, but broadly speaking it depends on the client. Some like having that direct contact with the writers themselves. Others prefer to have a middle person to be that conduit. So if that's a case of reporting back and taking minutes, some medical writers like having that extra level of support, so they would count on us to be able to drive the conversations. Other times the more established ones in general will be able to lead those conversations themselves and would rather ask the questions directly. So it depends, is I suppose what I'm getting at.
Okay. Again, a lot of this is going to be depends, and I would say as an overall level, it can depend very differently on different agencies, sort of thing. But a message, I guess, that I'm trying to get over is when people are looking at the writing position, and beyond the medcoms type question, as a medical writer, there are agencies where you have less client contact because that's the way it works. The account execs do the client service. You have agencies that don't have account execs and your writer are much more in touch. And then there's everything in between, sort of thing. So one of the messages I think is important that people understand is when they're talking to agencies about a medical writing role, they're asking questions about things like that. Who else is in the team? What is the client facing? What is this? What is that? What's the training opportunity and so on? They will vary, and that's, as I say, that's going to cross presumably across regulatory and medcoms and so on.
So just to add to that, our aim is to have our writers and our client services team building relationships with our clients. And training our clients to understand that if they have a content related question, they talk to the writer, and if they have a budgeting or project management related question, then they talk to the client services team.
Okay.
Some clients don't like that, but that's our model. That's how we want it to work.
Because some people just like one person to talk to and harass, and that's usually account exec rather than the writer, because if there's going to be a lot of harassment, that's in my experience is the way it tends to go. Okay, all right, okay. Right, a question which came up in several ways, I think is worth just touching on. The pharmaceutical industry knowledge. As a writer, how much pharmaceutical industry knowledge do you need, and is there a difference between the regulatory and medcoms? Because I think there might possibly be. I know you have got the specific pharma industry, right? But you know, how much do you need pharma industry? Can I start with you? So go.
Sure. I wouldn't say that if you're coming in at associate level in particular, I wouldn't say it is a requirement. I certainly know people who like excellent regulatory writers who have not worked in the pharmaceutical industry and perhaps got into it straight from academia or a similar role. I think it's beneficial, but it's not necessary.
Okay, all right. And on the medcom side, is it just the same story, or is it less or more interesting?
I would say it's pretty similar, to be honest. It definitely helps knowing how clinical trials work. But yeah, a lot of this training on the job anyway.
Okay, so we've got questions that seem to come. There's somebody coming in from medical information. Someone over here was coming in from a CRA type experience. So again, a lot of these is a bit specific. We know it's going to depend on you really, but the point is you're not overemphasizing the interest in particular areas. It's the package, as it were. Okay, does that all make sense? I'm going to just say this as a generic question. I don't know who wants to answer this. Judy, I'll go for you. There's a couple of questions coming in about salaries and things like this. Without numbers and all the rest of it, can one broadly say that it's a similar salary package and prospects for someone on both the regulatory and the medcom side, or in reality, is there any difference? Can I ask that as a straightforward question?
It's pretty similar, yeah.
Okay, that was nice and simple, thank you. Okay, we're going to run out of time, and I've got a lot of questions and comments here. In terms of, oh, sorry, my brain stopped there. There's so some of these I think are just a bit too specific, really. When we need to come up with this either after we finish the video or whatever. Interesting comment here from somebody about ghostwriting, which is something that obviously someone like me just goes a bit sort of like, we don't talk ghostwriting. For medcoms, is it more ghostwriting for publications that can be included in the authorship? Accepting the fact that I'll immediately say, we don't talk about ghostwriting, we're not ghostwriters. But there's an interesting point in there, which I think is worth making, particularly to the academics who might be looking at any of this sort of thing, because you come into this business and you're not going to be the author of a publication, are you?
No, that's correct. So, you know, we provide editorial services to authors who don't have either the time or the skill set to, you know, find the best way to present their data. We are, of course, always acknowledged in scientific manuscripts as accordance with the good publication practice, you know, and avoiding ghostwriting. And the source of our funding is always acknowledged as well. We have had discussions with some academic authors who want to include our staff on the author list because of the work that we've put in. Our policy is not to do that, because one of the criteria for authorship is to take responsibility for the, you know, the interpretation on the data. And if we haven't had any involvement in anything other than the writing of data we've been provided with, we don't fit that criterion.
Exactly, and it's very unusual for a medical writer in our business to be an author. I mean, there are instances, I know, but I think it's one of the important points that the academic type, PhD, whatever types particularly need to just think about, because they're used to writing something and having the data and doing something like that. Whereas now they're going to come and support somebody else, and they have to sort of think a little bit differently in that. And indeed they write something and it's criticized, you know, you get read in the old days, you know,
exactly.
If you write something,
if you write something and the author disagrees with it, the author gets what they want because they're the author, they're the named person who you know.
Exactly, and just to pursue that one, and I'm going to finish on this note actually, but I just think it's a really important point. People coming to the business have to understand that they're not coming into a situation where they're going to be left and hung out to dry. There's lots of support, and you all talked about teamwork and all sorts of things. That's an important point. An important point is you are coming in to offer a service to people, so you are going to get critiqued by everybody. Literally, and that can be quite harsh sometimes. So you've got to sort of be understanding of that. To come back to the teamwork side, it isn't just about being a medical writer and doing some writing. You're going to be talking to creatives and account execs like Will and all the rest of it, as well as the KOLs, the opinion leaders, the investigators, the clients, etc. And it's so that all as an environment is important to understand. Okay, right. I'm going to have to stop this. We've got loads and loads of questions which we'll try and pick off in the next 10 minutes or so. But as far as the recording is concerned, I think what we've done is what I was hoping to set out to do, which was get a clear understanding of, or a clearer understanding of perhaps some of the differences between the sort of regulatory and the medical medcoms side of it, and make people hopefully think about that. But it's a clear message that within certainly Bioscript, you can sort of effectively move around a little bit, and the opportunities are there, which is in itself quite important. So at the risk of cutting us off just when we're getting into full flow, I'm going to stop the conversation there, guys. Audience, don't run away if you don't have to, because we've still got some time to carry on answering some of these questions. Panelists, superb. Thank you very much. That worked really well. I know you're all happy for me to say this, so if anybody out there is wanting to make contact with you guys, LinkedIn is the easy way to do it. Yeah, obviously the website's there as well, but LinkedIn, you're all happy to see and hear from people that way. Okay, so on that note, everybody, I'm going to say a huge thank you for the moment, and I'm going to stop the recording. So we always just like to finish with a bit of a wave. So just bye-bye, everybody, and stay safe. Okay, take care. Bye.